Today's guest is one of the most respected names in fitness entrepreneurship. Peter Taunton is the founder of one of the largest gym franchises in America, and his vision reshaped what health and strength can mean in business and life.
When you're 22 years old and you have no plan B, you look at it as opportunity. And that's what I did. And I built that first club, and in 90 days, I sold enough memberships to cash flow that business for the year.
So in 2025, if someone were to get into the fitness industry, what niches would get you excited, or you would advise a young fitness entrepreneur go after?
You have to understand that. I always tell people, look, if you're passionate about the fitness space, number one, don't bet the farm. And number two, just understand that what does my rent cost? What's my price point going to be? How can I add more features and benefits, the relevance of what the consumer is looking for?
He's a trailblazer who turned passion into culture and built systems that empower thousands to transform their bodies and minds.
You know, what advice would you give to your younger self starting all over again, or what would that be?
So you don't get time back. So I wish I had more balance early on, but I know had I not drove my company the way that I did and as involved as the way that I was, I don't think I would have created what I did.
Peter, thank you for joining me at Paranoia Unfiltered, where I like to talk with founders, entrepreneurs, leaders who've had a pretty amazing journey. And like everybody else, I think we're just a finished product on the internet today, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn, where you just read like a highlight reel. And as someone who's done the whole sequence more than once, that's the furthest thing from the truth. So if you could just jump into, what inspired you to create Snap Fitness, why the fitness industry, and kind of walk us through the early days, and then, kind of explain the exit process.
Yeah, well, look, I'll try to condense it down, give you the Reader's Digest version. But look, early on, for 20 years, I was just running health clubs. And I had an opportunity. My first break was to try to turn around a failing health club in my hometown. And they paid me $16,000 a year.
And where was your hometown?
Wilmer, Minnesota, God's country, just a little town. Anyway, they said, we'd like you to come and manage this club. And if you can, we'll pay you $16,000 a year. But if you can turn this thing around, we'll let you buy us out with the profits. Now, at the time, that club was losing about $200,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
But when you're 22 years old and you have no plan B, you look at it as opportunity. And that's what I did. Over a period of 8 years, I was able to turn the club around and acquire enough equity to where I could go to a local bank and leverage my equity to buy the business out, refinance everything. And then I did that for another 12 years. So for 20 years, that's what I did. I ran this one club. I expanded, I added a few other clubs, and then I sold it. And what's interesting, I was about 40 years old, sold it, I had about $3 million in the bank, and I thought, I'm done. Once again, I grew up poor, so $3 million was more money than I thought I would ever see in my lifetime, and I was so thankful for it. And when I sold the business, one of the people that worked for me approached me and said, Peter, I know you don't want to build any more health clubs, but would you just build one for me? Just build me one, I'll run it. But because he didn't like the culture, that once the founders leave, he didn't like the culture. He asked me about 10 times, I said no every time. Finally one day I said, all right, I'll do it. I built one club, but instead of building these full service health clubs, I was building a club. I removed the swimming pools, the childcare, the climbing walls, the racquetball courts. I removed all that stuff, and I just created the bare bones of what you need to get fit. Now, when I was building this, I didn't know that I would go on to build one of the largest wellness brands in the world. I was just doing something for this person because I felt indebted to him. He had given me 12 years of his life. He was a young guy. I wanted to help him out. And I built that first club. And in 90 days, I sold enough memberships to cash flow that business for the year. Imagine that. That was so unfounded for me. So I took a step back after 5 months of being in this club, and I said, I'm going to build you another one. So I built a second one in a little bit different market, and the club performed the exact same way. Then I turned to him again, probably a year and a half later now, and I said, I'm going to build a third club. And I put this third club in a town of 3,500 people. And I thought, there's no way this thing is ever going to succeed. And it performed. The unit level economics fell into place. I opened it up in that little town, and it was performing, sold enough memberships in 90 days to cash flow for the year. That was the first time in my life that I thought, you know what? I have something here that's very scalable. It works in a small town, a mid-sized market, and an urban market. And that was the first time I thought about franchising. As I said, I didn't know that from there, I was going to build one of the largest wellness brands, but that's what I did. Here we are today, some 25 years later, 4,000 plus odd locations, 25 countries, just a great brand. And by building the infrastructure around Snap Fitness, I was able to acquire other brands and just fold them to the infrastructure, because we had a marketing team, we had legal, we had real estate, we had all these different divisions. It was very easy for me to acquire a brand and then just fold it into our admin, our human capital. So that's kind of how I got started and where it is today. I stepped down as a CEO about 6 years ago. And today I just focus a lot. I'm a Forbes Masterclass instructor. I work a lot with entrepreneurs, just trying to help them find their way, especially those that are trying to exit or pivot their business. So as you know, through all of your success and experiences, taking those experiences and helping people avoid the potholes and the road rash that comes with success is really rewarding.
Tell me about, as you grew that business, what capital problems did you have to overcome, right? Like immediately my brain's going, that's a lot of infrastructure, that's a lot of long-term lease liability. How did you, I think in a footprint business like that one, there's probably a lot of folks who just don't know how to tackle the capital requirements for it.
Yeah. When I started Snap Fitness, I started it with my own money. I didn't bring on any investors, and I started it with $300,000. No joke. So didn't require a lot of capital, $300,000. And I bootstrapped it literally early on. And I'm a firm believer in this. Early on, you have to wear multiple hats. And the early people that you bring on, the early employees, I always equate it to, they've got to be like Navy SEALs, right? They've got to be able to do multiple things. They have to be able to multitask. So it's a very special breed that you're looking for in the early stages of that company. In today's day and age, it's hard because a lot of people in today's workforce, especially the young workforce, one of the first questions I ask is, what's my title? And that's a slippery slope. I think early on you say, what's your title? Well, your title is, it's going to be anything that I ask you to do. And I promise you, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So you have to level the playing field and make sure that everybody rolls their sleeves up and pulls deep on the oars. That's human capital, the early human capital. It's so critical in the success of a business early on, especially when you're not going to go out and raise capital. You're going to use your own money, which is going to eliminate dilution in shareholders. And, you know, which if you dream big and you think that someday I may create something huge and you own 100% of it, that's a good position to be in if you can do it.
And what was the exit experience like when you took on private equity or institutional capital? Or
yeah, so after I started the company 6 years later, and along my ride, I was breaking all kinds of records on growth of fitness brands. So there was no shortage of interest from private equity, and I kept saying no, because I didn't need capital, and I had no experience at that time in private equity, and I wanted to own 100% of it, which I did. So for me, I said, no, enough. And then after 5, 6 years, I said, you know what, maybe it's time to pull some chips off the table. I had no idea what the value of my company would be. And when private equity came in and we ran a full process, it came back that my company was valued at about $100 million. Now keep in mind, this is the same guy 6 years ago, had $3 million in the bank, and I thought I had more money than I could ever dream of. So I was taken back by it. I sold 40% of the company for about $47 million, and none of it went on as debt. It literally went right into my checking account. And I knew at that point, I mean, you talk about your first exit. I could tell you where I was when I got the phone call from my accountants and my attorneys saying that the funds had landed in my checking account. Literally, I was on the first fairway at Spring Hill Golf Course up in Minnesota. And I immediately opened up my Wells Fargo app, and there sat $47 million. I mean, literally, my eyes welled up. It was such an unbelievable experience for me, especially coming from youngest of 7 kids, went to school in a 2-room schoolhouse, quit college. I mean, I always say, if I was a stock, you would have shorted me for sure. So it was just my stake in the sand to say, my gosh, I did it. I actually did it.
And from there, did you have multiple rounds of secondary as you continue to grow? Because once you take on private equity, that normally follows.
Yes, we did. At the time, my company was valued at $100 million, and believe it or not, I traded at a 20-time multiple. I was doing $5 million of EBITDA, but I had so much embedded EBITDA, so many franchises that were sold and not yet open. So I traded at a 20-time multiple. And so $100 million, then about 5-6 years later, the private equity company wanted to exit. They wanted to turn their investment back to cash, which is a normal process. At that time, my company was valued at $200 million, and I sold about the same amount. I sold about 25% interest, so I retained 44%. In hindsight, I wish I had sold more. But that's, you don't have a crystal ball. And I sold about 25% for about the same amount. And now I'm still, today, I've been diluted a bit because of COVID, threw us a curveball a little bit. But today I own about 22% of Lyft Brands. I'm still on the board, but I'm not involved in any of the day-to-day stuff anymore.
Fascinating. Take us back to the early part of the journey. How did you differentiate yourself in what can be such a competitive and commoditized offering?
That's a great question. And for me, I wanted to be different. And this is something that I say all the time. If you're going to get into business today, you have to have the courage to go stand on that hill by yourself, put that stake in the ground and say, look at me, I'm different than everybody else. Because if you just try to blend in with the crowd, the herd, you're going to get lost. So for me, at that point, think about it, it's 25 years ago. My point of difference was, my clubs, they're open 24 hours. Now, when I started it, you belong to one, you belong to them all, but I only had 3 clubs. So that's not that big of a carrot. So the clubs were open 24 hours a day. You belong to one, you belong to them all. But the real curveball to the consumer was no contract. Now, at that time, everybody was signing 12 and 18-month contracts.
Yeah.
So I said no contract. So when people came into my club, my sales shtick to them was, look, you have everything in here you need to get fit. So there was lots of cardio, lots of strengths, a lot of selectorized equipment. Now there was no child care, no swimming pools, no climbing walls. And if you needed that, I was not your answer, okay? But these clubs were about 3,000 square feet, and I could put them in little strip centers. So I always say I brought exercise to the doorsteps across America. I was in that neighborhood strip center next to the coffee shop. So most of my members lived within a couple of miles of my club, and the convenience factor won. And by saying no contract, when they would come in, I'd say, look, tell you what, try me for 30 days. If I don't deliver on my promise to you, what's the worst thing can happen? They'd look around like it's a trick question, and then I would finish it for them. I'd say, you just quit, right?
And what was the price point?
At that time, it was about $25 to $30 a month. Now it's a little bit more. So it was priced right. It wasn't the Planet Fitness $15, $10 a month deal. But look, there was enough meat on the bone. There was enough value there to the consumer. And I knew my product was not going to appeal to everyone, but I knew easily 70% of the exercising population would love this product. And I was right.
Because it's like the polar opposite of another Minnesota-founded gym, right? Lifetime.
Yeah, Lifetime. And Bahram Akradi is a good friend of mine, and we have a long history together. And I personally think Lifetime Fitness is probably the best in their category. You know what I mean? They just have such a great product. They've worked so hard and diligent, and they're very relevant. So yeah, and there's room for everyone. And there's another brand in Minnesota, Anytime Fitness, was founded in Minnesota as well.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they're a huge brand as well. So there's room for everyone.
So in 2025, if someone were to get into the fitness industry, what niches or kind of verticals would get you excited, or you would advise a young fitness entrepreneur as to what to go after?
It's a tough space, and the loyalty within the space it wanes back and forth. It's I would be very careful. It's a very capital intense business, and the unfortunate part about the fitness space, it's front end capital loaded.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you sign your lease, that's one box to check, but now you got to fill it full of equipment. I mean, you are pregnant with the deal. So like it or lump it, you're in the fitness space. And you have to realize that all your competition within the travel zone of where your customer resides, they're all going to acknowledge you. And if you have an idea that you think can stand on its own, if it's a hot enough idea, it's easily replicated in most cases. So you have to understand that. I always tell people, look, if you're passionate about the fitness space, number one, don't bet the farm. And number two, just understand that it's going to be a very competitive, it's going to be a long road, and just mind your P's and Q's. There's so many things to think about. What does my rent cost? What's my price point going to be? How relevant am I going to be? If I need to pivot, how can I pivot? And how can I evolve this space to add more features and benefits to the relevance of what the consumer is looking for? This fitness space, it evolves so fast, and it has evolved so beautifully over the last 25 years. I've been in the fitness space for over 40 years, but it continues to evolve and get technical, and now it's nutrition. Now the big buzzword is biohacking, and which I love. I'm a big fan of all of that stuff. Nutrition, exercise, it's all of it working together is a beautiful thing.
I have a friend who's founding a health tech app where they take your biomarkers every 6 months, but it connects it into an app with all of your wearables, so it tracks my sleep, everything, my calories. And then it gives you a protocol of both diet and exercise for, where you sit within your peer group, in your heart health and your blood health and all the different biomarkers that are so important.
Yeah, it is that biohack space. I have a friend here, Dr. D. He has a company in Miami here. It's called Biohack. And I've been with that company for probably 5 years. And I've been doing biohack work for 20 years. Back when Cybergenics out of Las Vegas, I was doing that at the time. When you see this guy's like 75, completely jacked, right? I'm like, wow, what is he doing?
I saw it on the back of Airplane magazine.
Exactly, that's where I saw it. Anyway, so that's Cybergenics. And then I moved on to other companies that were mimicking Cybergenics at a better price point. And then I was doing a speaking gig here in Miami, and with the founder of Biohack, and he and I became friends, and I've been doing that ever since. And same thing, there they draw blood every quarter, and then they balance your injectables with your vitamins and whatever you need to do. But I really feel that if you really want to dial it in, that's the next step to longevity. And obviously eating sensibly and exercise and rest, that's a given.
It's the 80%.
That's it. But the other part of it is, working with science to optimize your performance.
I have a selfish scaling question. How do you think through, or how did you think through on corporate owned versus franchising, right? That I think that's a very big decision when scaling and, with your global rapid growth. At what point did you say, okay, we're going to do corporate owned or franchising, and how do you kind of bifurcate that going forward?
Well, for me, starting Snap Fitness, and keep in mind, when I started it, I didn't know that I was going to build this behemoth of a brand, but I knew if I was going to, I needed to have validation in every size market. If I only put it in urban markets, then the street would say that product only works in urban markets. I didn't. I went to an urban market, a mid-sized market, and then this little town. And when all of them performed beautifully, I knew I had a tiger by the tail. I really did. And I knew at that point, I can sell, this is sellable, very scalable. And I documented everything. So, my OCD is, I'm meticulous to detail, and just putting out the plan, systems, processes, and growth. So for me, I controlled everything from the franchise sales to the real estate, to the training, to the build out, delivery of the equipment, install, pre-marketing, pre-opening, everything, every part of it, ongoing support. And in each one of those lanes, I had a person that is responsible for that lane. So I always considered myself to be like a head football coach, and I have assistant coaches in each one of these lanes. And I would tell them all the time, look, don't pay attention, don't be focusing on the lane next to you, because then you're going to take your eye off the ball of what you're responsible for. This is a team, and if any one of these stumble, it's going to affect the whole picture. And it worked well. I mean, there was 1 year, in one single year, I opened 377 new health clubs in 1 year.
Oh my God.
I was opening more than one health club a day. I'm not talking about signing leases. I'm talking about a door opening with people walking into exercise. I was opening more than one club a day, which is, just get your head around that.
Yeah, unfathomable.
So that is systems, processes at its finest.
In my world, I have witnessed almost a friction-full relationship between franchisor and franchisee. What were some of your core tenets, whether it's leadership or operations, to create alignment between you and your franchisees?
Well, look, with franchisees, just as a general rule of thumb, when they're winning and absolutely killing it, they look in the mirror and they say, "You are awesome." But when they struggle, they look for someone to point the finger at. So as a franchisor, you better have thick skin. And I think any franchisor on the planet will tell you the same thing. Look, don't take things personal. People, they want to be entrepreneurs, and especially first-time entrepreneurs. Even though you lay the path and you give them the secret sauce, this is what you need to do, sometimes they underestimate the level of work and commitment and diligence and consistency of good things that all come into creating a great product where the consumer is going to want to pay you their hard-earned money. And some people don't understand, hey, I didn't sign up to work this hard. Now, of course, some people get lucky. They go in the right spot with very little competitive threats, and they just absolutely kill it. Other times, people get a little bit blindsided because they open up, somebody else opens up a gym half a mile away. They're offering similar products. They're marketing. I mean, there's only so much market share that you can grab. So it makes it difficult. So for me, when they get into the business, I let them know that, look, this is a business. It's competitive. It's a very enjoyable business because it's a feel-good business. You're putting smiles on people's faces. Let's face it, when people walk into your gym and they lose 20, 30 pounds, some of those clients that have a weight issue, and you're watching the weight come off and you're seeing a little bit of a hop in their step, they smile easy, the confidence, all those things. As someone who's owned gyms before, that's vicariously, I love that experience. I love having a front row seat to changing lives every day. That's just such a beautiful premise.
What were some of the mistakes or pivots along the way that became invaluable kind of lessons in your framework that you probably use when advising investors or startup founders?
Look, I think a mistake that we made was we tried to create our own software application on the back end because we were using third-party software. And if you're paying a couple $100 a month, you start taking that times thousands of clubs. It's a real number. So I went to my IT team and I said, look, what would it take for us to create our own back-end system? And I was talking to my CTO, and he says, Peter, this is definitely doable. And at the end of the day, hey, look, I'm taking advice from people that I thought were competent and they knew what it was going to take. But at the end of the day, it's my call. I could have said no. I said, yes, let's do it. It took twice as long and it took twice the money. And even then the product was average at best, okay? So it cost me millions of dollars, lots of gray hair, and then finally we just pulled the chute on it, right? So I would probably say, look, stay in your lane to some respects, and technology would be one that I would, if I had to go into technology again, I would go into it with my eyes open and really understand the downside. So that's probably my biggest hiccup along the way, that if I had to do over, I would have stayed away from that. And not necessarily just, it cost us a few $1 million to try to develop. It's the biggest regret I have is the hardship that I had some of my franchisees have to go through while I was trying to bring a product. That to me was the part that rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't deliver on what I wanted to.
With that vein of thought, what do you think is probably going to be the biggest change and transformation in the fitness industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I tell you what, it's not about faster treadmills, heavier weights. It's not that anymore. And that part of it has left. And even technology on the treadmill. I mean, years ago, I was telling many of the manufacturers, they are still friends of mine in the industry because I've been in it for so long and was growing so fast. But at a time when they were trying to introduce all of this technology into the treadmill, as an example, you would go in, I mean, there's some, I'm not going to name brands, but some you would go in, you'd punch in a 4-digit code, and it would have your workout on there. Well, the reality of it is, probably 95% of the people who get on a treadmill, they hit quick start, okay? They just want to get on, get it over with and get off, right? So I told the guys, look, what you're trying to do, it's great in theory, but it's going to be poor in execution because the dogs will not eat the dog food. And they looked at me like that was not the answer they wanted to hear, but I've seen enough of it with the consumer. And I said, look, where the technology is going to come, it's going to be on wearable devices. Because now, if I'm doing intervals, if I'm running on the treadmill for a minute and then I go over here and do box jumps, as soon as I get off that treadmill, the treadmill is no longer tracking my effort, okay? So I said, it's going to be wearables. And obviously, that was right. People that really want to push their performance and measure their output, they're wearing a device. And it's tracking whether they're doing resistance training or whether they're running on a treadmill.
Where do you see the virtual machines, the kind of the remote AI coached versus the gym and the in-person?
I think it's going to be, there's some great AI technology out there, unbelievable. And if you can take the time to put the input in, here's what I ate today, which is tedious. A lot of people, oh, Peter, I note everything that I put in my mouth throughout the day. I've tried that a couple of days, right? After that, I'm so damn sick of it, right? So, but if you can do that, if you can track everything that you put in, and if you could do it for maybe 10 days, then AI will spit back to you, look, here's what you're eating, and you're going to have a noticeable change if you just take these things and eat it earlier in the day. And that's what I tell people all the time. Look, like telling somebody, look, no more desserts for you, pal. Many people, that's a deal breaker for many, okay? So I tell them, look, if you're going to have dessert, try to have it earlier in the day. Don't have it at 9 o'clock at night, right? I mean, it's not, if you hit people with carrot sticks and celery, that's not sustainable for people like myself who like to eat. I exercise so I can look good. Vanity plays a role. But secondly, I want to have a great life, great performance. I want to be able to, my golden years, I'm 63, and I want to make sure that I'm active. And I don't want to have any limits physically on what I want to do in my 80s and 90s, hopefully. That's kind of my goal. And I think it's realistic, the way medicine is going and the biohack, where it's going. If you're willing to commit to it, I think there's some amazing transformations that'll take place.
Looking back, what are you most proud of in building Snap Fitness?
Boy. Well, the grit it takes, but I think my grit was driven by even a little bit paranoia. I had no plan B. So you talk about motivation, right? I mean, if this fails, I have no plan B. I'm not a trust fund baby that had some safety net that I could fall back on. So for me, I loved the commitment, the grit that I had to build the brand, the commitment I had to my employees. And I learned a lot of that from my father, who ran a small grocery store in my hometown. He put himself above nothing, which I really appreciated about him. And I didn't realize it. I used to sell popcorn in front of his grocery store when I was 8 years old. And some of the life lessons I learned through the lens of that 8-year-old, watching my dad, were invaluable. My dad, I'd see him shoveling the sidewalk. I'd see him carrying out groceries. I'd see him stocking the shelves, writing payroll checks, interacting with the customers, with his employees. And he put himself above nothing. And I think if you've got that mindset, it'll serve you well even in today's business. You know, people say, oh, Peter, you got to hire people to do that. I agree. Over time, your time is better served doing other things. But early on, when you're building a company, if you can show your staff that you are in all facets, right? You come in, you work the long days, you're involved in every facet of the business, making sure that everybody is pulling deep on the oars. They love that sense of teamwork that takes place. So that's what I would be advising them on, is just, collectively hire your team carefully and unite.
And what do you hope your legacy will be in the fitness industry specifically?
I hope that people appreciate of taking the chance on a smaller footprint in some of these really small, obscure markets that would never have. I mean, the only options they had for exercise in some of these small markets that I was in was a small little retrofitted, space in the gymnasium with a bunch of old, tired, rusty equipment and a couple of Schwinn Airdynes and a universal gym. That was all they had to offer. So for me, coming in and giving them state of the art at an affordable price with the convenience of 24 hours a day. I hope that they can appreciate the risk that I took. Obviously, in hindsight now, it looked easy, but back then, you didn't know how small could be. So I hope that, and hey, look, there's a lot of great entrepreneurs out there that have done some amazing things, and I just hope that people can applaud the entrepreneur. That's capitalism at its finest, which I'm such a big fan of today. Even prior to this interview, understanding what you did and you and your wife did collectively, the teamwork, the road rash that you probably had to go through, the persevere. When many people would quit, you roll up your sleeves and you dig in, because quitting is not an option. That's the beautiful part of being an entrepreneur, in my opinion.
One of the questions I get asked a lot, and I always like hearing other entrepreneurs' answer to it, is, what advice would you give to your younger self starting all over again, or what would that be?
That's an easy one for me. I get asked that question a lot, and I always tell people, look, I wish I would have danced more. And what I mean by that is, growing up the way that I did, I had no plan B. And I knew what broke felt like. Okay, so for me, it was my chance to be successful, and I left it all on the field. So as I was growing my brand, my kids were small. I wish I had spent more time with my kids. And when I talk to my kids today, they say, "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. You were great, but I know that I could have been so much more, so much better." So you don't get time back. So I wish I had more balance early on, but I know, had I not drove my company the way that I did and as involved as the way that I was, I don't think I would have created what I did. So today, let's face it, today I've created a legacy for my children and my children's children, and hopefully they can appreciate the effort that I put forth. And it wasn't easy, but hopefully they do good with it. And my kids are amazing. They're very humble. They're very kind and compassionate. And at the end of the day, that matters.
I think that matters above everything else. Well, that's probably the perfect place to end. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Peter, and great to meet you and get to know you a little bit better.
No, my pleasure. And congrats on all your success. It's amazing.
Thank you.